Houston, it's rodeo time. Your local Tacova store is the place to go for the finest handmade cowboy boots, jeans, belts, cowboy hats, and apparel for men and women. If you've never owned boots before, let them help you get your first pair like they did for me. Stop by one of your local Houston Tacova stores and get ready for the rodeo with their understated approach to Western. Whether it's your first rodeo or you're a seasoned pro, your local Tacova store is the place to go for rodeo season. Tacovas, don't go gently. Today on CityCast Houston, state and local officials have turned a local housing development into a heated political talking point. But beyond the fear-mongering lies deception and issues that have caused some people to completely lose their homes. So, what's really happening inside Colony Ridge? And how long have government officials known about these problems? Houston Landing political reporter Paul Cobler joins me to answer these questions and more. It's Monday, March 4th. I'm Raheel Ramzanali, and here's what Houston's talking about. Paul, welcome back into CityCast Houston. How are you?
I'm doing well, Raheel. Thanks for having me.
It's always a treat to have you on because your reporting is so eye-opening, and this story in particular because it's been in the headlines, Colony Ridge, right? We hear about it. It has become a political ploy. It has become a real issue. But before we start about your reporting, I don't think people still know where Colony Ridge is in comparison to the city of Houston. Where exactly is it?
Yeah, it's about 30 miles northeast of the city. If you take Interstate 69 northeast, I drive it all the time. My girlfriend lives in Shreveport, so I'm always cruising up the interstate, looking over at Colony Ridge off to my right. But it's just a massive, massive development that's out there. It's really just kind of in the middle of nowhere is the best way to explain it. I mean, it's really just this wetland that has been totally cleared of trees, brushes, and it is just 33,000 acres. In size. It's gigantic, but it's just kind of hidden off of the interstate northeast of 69. Anybody who drives up there, you just pull off around Cleveland and there it is.
And now it has become this crazy story. And your latest reporting in conjunction with the Texas Tribune found that at least 3 state agencies were warned about potential problems with this development years earlier. And residents sent state agencies more than 6 complaints about Colony Ridge and its marketing arm, Terranios Houston, from 2016 to 2023. What problems are exactly happening at Colony Ridge, and why do we keep seeing headlines about it?
Well, yeah, and I can give you a quick primer on this because I had a really interesting perspective being our politics reporter at the Houston Landing. When I joined the organization in the summer, a few of my colleagues were working on this investigation of this massive, massive amount of foreclosures. It's something like 90% of all the foreclosures in Liberty County are from Colony Ridge. And so they had a lot of questions about kind of the business practices that they were doing there. They were looking into this. While also at the exact same time, Governor Greg Abbott comes out, starts talking about this place being a no-go zone because of large numbers of people that allegedly immigrated into the country illegally, drug cartel activity, really like scary sounding stuff. And from talking to local officials, I mean, it was very clear very quickly that none of that was true. And so I'm watching this happen, reporting on the political side and needing to report on our governor's comments. But I'm also, aware of this investigation that my colleagues are doing that published in December. And it basically, from the experts that they spoke to, showed this predatory lending scheme where mostly Latino people were taken advantage of using the language barrier and this like very aggressive marketing tactic to get people in on these very high interest loans that they're far more likely to foreclose on. And then once the foreclosure would happen, they would also buy the land back, flip it for a profit, to someone else who was unaware of basically what was happening there. So I am like simultaneously aware of these two conversations that are going on and wondering, what is happening? What is this? What are these state officials even talking about? So we published our story in December. Just a few days later, the U.S. Department of Justice sues Colony Ridge, essentially echoing the findings of our investigation. And so we have that, now we're like, how did everybody miss this in the state government that has been spending months, multiple special sessions talking about Colony Ridge? That was basically kind of the premise of where we started was what did the state know when all of these officials last fall were talking about crime, illegal immigration, drug cartels, et cetera? And what did they know about the foreclosures and the business practices that were actually harming people in the county?
Yeah, so what did they know, right? Because you found that they've had complaints filed about Colony Ridge from residents for a while now. So what did they know and which agencies knew?
Yeah. So it's the Attorney General's office received quite a few complaints. The Department of Savings and Mortgage Lending received quite a few complaints. We're aware of a lot of state legislators that were written to, but essentially kind of what these residents of Colony Ridge were saying was echoing our investigation, echoing the Justice Department, saying that they were foreclosed upon without notice, that they were getting these very aggressive marketing tactics sent their way, that they would have issues with their land, like flooding, land being cleared without them asked, and would essentially not hear back from Colony Ridge at all. And so it's just this whole kind of smorgasbord of issues. And then on top of that, the TCEQ had previously investigated and punished Colony Ridge, fined them about $29,000 for a bunch of environmental issues. Basically sediment running off into nearby creeks and ditches, harming the drainage system for nearby Plum Grove and other parts of Liberty County. And so this was, officials were most definitely aware of there being some kind of issue, especially considering the growth that this place has seen just in the last 10 years. I mean, the estimates range from anywhere from like 40 to 75,000 people have moved into this rural county, Liberty County. I mean, it is not something that can just fly under the radar for 10 years until now, even from the state perspective.
What was done to rectify these complaints? Because this sounds horrible, right? Like if you start getting these complaints about, hey, we're getting taken advantage of here. We need your help, government. Like, help us out here. What did they do? Yeah.
So largely, they were dismissed. They were either dismissed or the people were advised to talk to outside counsel. It is difficult. There's kind of the distinction between state and federal law. We've heard from a lot of folks that it's not necessarily clear if what the developers in Colony Ridge are alleged to have been doing is illegal in Texas, but it is, at least according to the federal government, illegal at a federal level. So it's a little unclear what the state could have done, but they certainly didn't do anything. They dismissed most of the complaints. A few of them were referred to the Attorney General's office, but we also found that the Attorney General didn't follow up on pretty much all of these complaints until after Colony Ridge started making news as a quote unquote haven of illegal immigration and drug cartels. So it really just kind of fell on deaf ears mostly. We really couldn't find any that made it past square one other than the environmental complaints that TCEQ investigated.
Gosh, that is so heartbreaking because residents are being taken advantage of. And now to add another layer to all of this, Governor Greg Abbott received about $1.4 million from the community's developers, right, for his campaign. So you've got that going on. Like, this is where it doesn't make sense. So there was a campaign donation, and what happened between that donation to now where conservatives are making Colony Ridge out to be this haven for drug cartel activity? And it was before, like, we're just dismissing all these complaints of the actual wrongdoings there of residents being taken advantage. I'm so confused by all this. Like, how does this all work out?
Yeah, well, the Colony Ridge developers, the Harris brothers, Trey, John, Harris, it's hard to know exactly where their relationship with Greg Abbott soured, but we certainly know they had one going back to about 2017 was when the first donation came in. At the time, the developers were trying to get a federal opportunity zone from the Trump tax cuts, if you remember that federal law that was passed early into his term in office. And that's a great advantage for them. It could save them a lot of money, allow for further development to happen. But when they were asking for this, there were a lot of complaints at the local level from Liberty County officials, from nearby city of Plum Grove officials saying, this growth is out of control. We just simply don't have the infrastructure to be able to keep up with it, which is a totally fair complaint. I mean, they failed a lot of school bonds. Their schools are overcrowded. And so Greg Abbott gets this donation, and all we know is that a short time later, this federal opportunity zone is granted by him. Everything seems hunky-dory, other than kind of at the local level is conflict for quite a few years. And then we reach 2023 and it kind of blows up. And I really think the one simple explanation, just as the political reporter, is simply kind of the politics of our time. Everyone's focused on the border. Everyone is focused on immigration and the high numbers that we see Texas Governor Greg Abbott is trying to make a really big deal about this with Operation Lone Star, Senate Bill 4. I think he's, the busing to New York City. I think he's really looking for any opportunity to kind of make hay out of the immigration issue. And he just saw this, $1.4 million from my friendly developers or a political win that, could potentially bring in even more donations. And so I think he made that calculus, but it's really difficult to say for sure.
What exactly is happening with the residents that you've talked to, and how are they being taken advantage of? Just, you explained it that, hey, they get these high interest loans and then they foreclose on it. But there was also a lot of different things happening in terms of some of these residents were actually paying their loans on time, their payments, and they were still being screwed out of their land.
Yeah, I mean, that's really just the sad thing here is we haven't really been able to find somebody that was totally satisfied with how things turned out. Now, I think there certainly could be a level of, we're not hearing from the people who are happy with their land, who are happy with how things worked out. Colony Ridge, the developers there contend that they have many, many, many satisfied customers, but we also are aware of many unsatisfied customers who feel really that they've been screwed over and have lost their dream of home ownership. I mean, they've lost tens of thousands of dollars and kind of are left without options. I spoke to a number of people who are in that situation. Now, going forward with the federal government involved, it does feel like there's a lot more movement. Most of these people that we spoke to who previously hadn't heard anything from state officials have since gotten calls from the U.S. Justice Department investigators, who taking their questions, getting their comments. It's difficult to say where this is going to go at this point. It's just a civil lawsuit. These federal government civil lawsuits can take a long time to play out in court, but there is movement at this point in time, which is better than where we were before for those people.
Yeah. How do you see playing out with that lawsuit and in terms of these residents getting maybe some of their money back, or maybe these developers, maybe even them getting some kind of fine or some kind of sanction or some kind of penalty here? That would be nice as well.
Yeah, well, the Colony Ridge developers maintain that they've done nothing wrong. They're innocent. The interview they actually gave us in January was the first they had spoken on the record. They didn't speak too much directly about the lawsuit, but they certainly believe their business practices are above water and this shouldn't be an issue. Now, the federal government and the Justice Department, it's difficult to say what they're shooting for exactly. I would definitely imagine a penalty is somewhere in there. I think the most likely thing we could see happen here is a settlement. These cases are very rare to ever see go to trial, but, it's really it's difficult to predict. That's the justice system. And I imagine it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a number of years. And that is just the unfortunate situation for the people who lived in Colony Ridge, who lost money at Colony Ridge, is they're not going to get a resolution, I think, anytime soon.
Shipping can make or break a sale, so optimize how you ship your orders with ShipStation. They make it easy to automate and manage orders no matter how big your business grows. And they might even be able to help reduce shipping and warehouse costs. So optimize and keep up your momentum for growth with ShipStation. Sign up for your free 60-day trial now at ShipStation.com and use the code POD. That's ShipStation.com with the code POD.
Does Monday at the office feel like a storm? Not with Microsoft Copilot. That feeling when Copilot gets everyone up to speed instantly? It's sunny again. When Copilot simplifies complex data so your teams can act, that sun's shining on a beach. And when Copilot uncovers hidden insights, you're on that beach with your people, and you find buried treasure. That's Microsoft Copilot. Learn more at Microsoft.com/AI for all.
Colony Ridge is also a fascinating story to examine because it caught fire, right, late 2023 with all the political headlines. But then you've got this community right next to it, Plum Grove, which you've mentioned in passing in this interview so far. But they've been trying to bring attention to this Colony Ridge area in terms of the growth and what they've been doing for almost 10 years. What are they saying now? Are they finally going, hey, thanks for listening. We're finally talking about Colony Ridge, even though it's not for the right reasons, because my understanding is Plum Grove is wait, they're ruining our land here and they're wiping out land. Can we do something about this, right?
I had understood sort of this almost kind of racism, this fear-mongering over illegal immigration to be coming out of Liberty County somehow. And so I wanted to look into this, and I do want to, differentiate all of the residents from Plum Grove, I'm not describing them as one block. There were absolutely very legitimate complaints of infrastructure being harmed, of far too much traffic, of potential flooding issues being created by all the clearing. But on the other side, I think a few people in Plum Grove really started looking at the number of Hispanic people that were living there and saying, this is clearly a symptom of a broken border and the politics that we kind of hear today about immigration. One of the people that I spoke with, Leanne Penton Walker, is a council member for the city of Plum Grove. She used to be the mayor. I spoke to her on the record. She's fully great replacement theory, which is the theory that there's some sort of cabal trying to replace the Americans living in the country now with immigrants who will vote Democrat. Absolutely no evidence for that, but she is certainly fully on that train, was beating that drum for at least 10 years, caught the attention of the Center of Immigration Studies, which is a far-right think tank that's been labeled pretty dubious in its reporting. And so that was what was just so fascinating to me, is kind of being able to watch how this right-wing echo chamber was able to amplify itself, from Plum Grove, Texas, which is this town of about 1,000 people, and work its way up all the way to the highest levels of the Texas government. And, what I will say is, again, just differentiating all the people of Plum Grove, they are happy to see the federal government stepping in. A lot of Liberty County officials are happy to see some sort of movement to address these legitimate complaints, these legitimate concerns from residents, these concerns over infrastructure. But it's still, at this point, they are not totally sure what to expect, just because of how long this process is likely to take to play out.
So with all these issues going on, the headlines, the actual issues of residents being taken advantage of by these developers, according to that lawsuit, so that's out there. Why should this matter to Houstonians?
Yeah, well, just on kind of the simple level, I mean, there's been this kind of phenomenon of people filling in the outside counties around Harris County to find cheaper land, commute into the city. We all know how big and sprawling Houston, Texas is. And this is just another example of this. And, largely, I feel like we're going to continue seeing this issue as Houston continues to expand. There is a lot of unincorporated land in Harris County. There's a lot of unincorporated land in the counties surrounding us. And there's a lot of potential for developers to take advantage of the lack of regulation there. The legislature has tried to make changes to that and has failed to this point. And then secondly, I would just say, this says a lot about our state government. When there are real issues, when Texans are coming to their state government asking for help with those issues, and the response that they get is fear-mongering, hate-filled rhetoric. I mean, it just kind of leaves me wondering, what else are we missing in this state? And I just think it's something that everybody who lives here should be paying attention to.
Paul, that was great. Thank you so much for joining us. The reporting was eye-opening, and it really goes beyond the headlines of all the rhetoric and fear-mongering to the actual issues. So kudos to you and the Texas Tribune as well for that partnership. That was great. And thank you for joining us and breaking this down for us.
Yeah, of course.
That was Paul Cobler. You can read the entire story he worked on with Alejandro Serrano of the Texas Tribune with the link in our show notes. It's Monday, so this is the perfect time to share CityCast Houston with 5 of your friends so they can stay better informed about the city we all love, H-Town. That will do it for today. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new.
Sorry, I screwed that up.